Elsewhere on Fox, as they moved to the 5, Dana Perino, and she was one who was making torture excuses back in the day. She's an OG torture apologist under the Bush administration where she was spokesperson. Here is Dana Perino also defending the torture program.
But also with the Obama team.
Right.
And what I would ask people to think about is, have we forgotten what it was like on the morning after 9/11?
Yeah.
And what was happening? She was actually following orders, okay? She did follow orders that were based on a lawful program asked for by the President of the United States. And to the subject
Pause it. Hold on one second. We've already addressed the issue of following orders. There were plenty of people within the CIA who did not follow these orders. Ali Soufan, again, writing in The Atlantic, quote, and he was an FBI agent brought in to interrogate a man who would ultimately be waterboarded 83 times. I know from personal experience that many professionals within the agency, speaking of CIA, courageously chose to stand up against the enhanced techniques, walking away from black sites in protest and registering a large number of complaints that eventually led to the Inspector General's report.
Also, they had to create a legal framework to do this. Its legality was not a settled question and probably still isn't.
Indeed. And I think certainly in terms of international law, it is not legal.
United States. And to the subject of
and I would also argue the 1993 federal statute against torture also made it illegal.
Destroyed evidence. There was no case that was ongoing when those tapes were destroyed. And that might seem to some people like a distinction without a difference, but let me just tell you, if you're in the CIA, do you have reason to believe that the congressional members of Congress who are going to use this for decades now, we're 17 years after the fact, and they still want to pick at this scab and not allow a woman who has an amazing record of public service to be able to serve? That really chaps my hide. If there are clear reasons that she should not be allowed to run this department that have nothing to do with her work, that has not been questioned. The program does not exist anymore.
Yeah.
Pause it. Why doesn't the program exist anymore? If this is such a wonderful program that she administered, why doesn't it exist anymore? Why was evidence of this great American service destroyed? Why don't we have it in museums? Why don't we feature those videos on a loop in the Smithsonian? Why can't I bring my children to walk through the Smithsonian to see the videotapes of the wonderful work this would-be head of the CIA performed on our behalf if this was so impressive and so important to our security?
The program does not exist anymore.
Yeah.
That, to me, if there's a substantial reason, fine, let's have that discussion. But this one isn't it, and grandstanding is so despicable.
And it's going to happen. By the way, I think chapping your hide is worse than waterboarding, from what I understand.
Well, you could make that case.
Yes, right? You could.
No shame, these people.
No shame.
Hey, she's just trying. She just did id Paul for a second in that clip, right? She said something about how she's a woman, that they're trying to tear her down as a woman. She's just trying to show that a woman can torture as well as a man.
There you go. And it's always when you start to torture, all of a sudden you're the bitch. That's the problem, right? Like if a guy tortures, it's perfectly fine. But when a woman does it, then everybody's got a problem with it. Meanwhile, later in that same segment, Juan Williams tries to talk some sense into the 5. I don't know. I mean, it's almost embarrassing to play this where someone is sitting every day with people who are torture apologists and then tries to convince them that torture is problematic. I mean, this really the big takeaway from this is that Juan Williams doesn't really care that much.
What about Mike Pompeo, who was the former CIA director? He too has said, yeah, I think torture might work. So the question becomes, wait a second, are we going backwards here? Having had a moment of conscience about this, where we were torturing people even after the fact. It wasn't any 24 scenario where, we got to get some information.
So we're just doing it for fun.
Pause it, because I will tell you, there's no such thing as a 24, homeland situation where you can torture people and find out. That's made up. And the implications, of course, and I will include, because Sam Harris wrote a very well-known piece apologizing for torture. In the title of the piece, I think, is "In Defense of Torture." He wrote in the Huffington Post right around the time that this was a political issue, even though this was a philosophical journey. He wrote in the most political of outlets at the time, the Huffington Post, an apology for torture, where he used a scenario of, the child who's been kidnapped, and they're in, this is the thing that you see in all the TV shows, right? They're in the well, and the well is going to fill up with water, and if you don't get there in 12 hours. But here's the thing. You don't know that when you sit down to torture someone. If you did, you wouldn't need to torture them for that information. A. B. Interrogators will tell you that information garnered through torture is most often not reliable. Torture is most effective in getting false confessions out of people. That is why it's used.
Not that matters, but yeah.
And, because I'm addressing the efficacy argument. And looking at an isolated instance of torture does not give you the picture of the implications of torturing someone. Because once those two cops do it, then the rest of the force will start to torture every time they think there could be any scenario where somebody could be down a well. We don't know, but maybe. And then they start to say we got used to torture. If you do it with one person, it's really not is it really any less moral to torture in one instance than another? I'm doing the same thing. They're both guilty. And then you have a torture regime. But let's hear Juan Williams arguing about why we shouldn't be promoting someone who was, if not the architect of our torture program, certainly one of the chief builders.
And now taken care of.
We have no
conscience. The president has the right to say, I need this information, take extraordinary or enhanced interrogation tactics. But these people that she was torturing, those people was after the fact.
Juan, you waterboard me without the water.
It is, but it's sloppy use of the word torture.
How's it sloppy?
I'll tell you right now.
If it's waterboarding, if it's putting you in a box.
So, some of these guys are real losers and real wimps, okay? They're crybabies. You put a caterpillar on their shoulder and they cry for their mom and no more jihad and they spill it. So that to me is not torture. It really isn't.
Well, I'm just telling you.
It's in the eye of the beholder, Juan. That's the problem.
Loud music, or there's some sleep deprivation. There's been changes in law. She will follow the law as it currently stands on the books.
Right.
That's why I said the key point. The key point is, will she renounce the use of torture?
No, but that leads me to the question, Dana. Would you break the law if you could save lives and ruin your career, or would you follow the law and watch people die? That's an interesting question.
You don't need to do that.
Well,
the president
break
can
the law.
protect
people, but she didn't. I mean, that's a bad hypothetical.
Oh, is it?
Because you're saying that leads me to her saying she didn't break any laws.
No, I was just saying in the future.
Yeah, she did break laws.
She mentioned sleep deprivation. That can actually kill you, just to clarify.
In fact, there was a prisoner who did die.
The actual thought experiment would be, would you break the law and not have your career ruined?
Right, exactly.
I wrote a biography of Doug Feith a while back at one of my old jobs, and the legal framework they create. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but they did some really impressive work trying to justify this, and it worked. None of them will
John
face
Yoo,
any
right?
consequences.
He's at Berkeley.
The CIA Inspector General report that we cited earlier showed that Gul Rahman was tortured and starved until he froze to death. The CIA lied about this, but it came out in a ACLU suit that was in the CIA's own report.
It's the first time they've done that.
Wimps, crying people. So
I'm still holding out hope that something will someday happen to these folks because there should not be a statute of limitations on this.
yeah, there shouldn't be. And again, the fact of the matter is, when Barack Obama said turn the page, all of this became edified and legal and fine. It was a moral blessing.